Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Jen Benson, and I have the pleasure of serving as the president of ABL, the Alliance for Business Leadership. ABL is a nonpartisan coalition of CEOs, entrepreneurs, investors, and business leaders at all levels who all believe that social responsibility and sustainable growth of the Massachusetts economy go hand in hand. Today's program has been developed in collaboration with the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts, or BECMA, and we are grateful not only for their partnership today, but for all the work they're doing to advance equity, economic empowerment, and racial justice in the Commonwealth. On behalf of ABL and BECMA, welcome. Today's program is the latest in a series of free events that we have opened up to the full ABL community, sharing resources to help small businesses, employers, and workers navigate the COVID crisis. Thank you to our sponsors at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts for their support and enabling us to host these programs with the ABL community. Today, we will hear from leaders from the private, nonprofit, and public sectors who will share resources on how to navigate the economic crisis so many small businesses and nonprofits are facing. Our panelists are looking forward to sharing technical assistance, guidance, and to answer your questions. Joining us today are Margaret Laforest, who is the Regional Director for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Office of Business Development. As a member of the Baker-Polito administration's Executive Office of Economic Development, she advances the agency's mission to strengthen the economy and increase job growth throughout Massachusetts by providing businesses with a central point of contact that facilitates access to resources, expertise, and incentive programs. She previously served as a Quincy City Councilor and Vice President of the Quincy Chamber of Commerce. We also welcome Natalia Urtubey, who serves as the Director of Small Business at the City of Boston Mayor's Office of Economic Development. Natalia has led the city's small business relief efforts during the COVID-19 pandemic, distributing more than $7.5 million in direct grants and implementing innovative programming to help small businesses survive the economic impact of the pandemic. Natalia previously served as the Executive Director of Imagine Boston 2030, and she serves on the board for several local nonprofits. Our final panelist today is Quincy Miller. He's the president and vice chairman of Eastern Bank, where he drives the overall strategic direction of Eastern, which serves communities in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. His career is rooted in consumer banking, and he is passionate about supporting communities where he lives, serving on the boards of numerous local organizations, including the Alliance for Business Leadership. We are so grateful for his voice and expertise at ABL. Quincy is also one of 19 executives from leading corporations in Massachusetts who have come together this summer to create the new Commonwealth Racial Equity and Social Justice Fund, a transformative initiative to dismantle systemic racism in Massachusetts. Moderating today's conversation is BECMA's Executive Director, Segun Idowu. At BECMA, Segun advocates for policies that positively impact its member businesses. Before leading BECMA, he organized the Boston Police Camera Action Team to ensure accountability and safety in Boston through the mandatory use of police body-worn cameras, and was elected to serve as the first vice president of the Boston chapter of the NAACP. Many of you have either heard of or worked with Segun. He is a critical voice in Massachusetts, and we are so grateful to BECMA for their partnership and leadership. Before I turn it over to Segun, I want to share a few housekeeping reminders before we get started. While our audience is currently on mute in the webinar, you still have a voice, and we hope you will submit a question using the Q&A box below, as the panel will dedicate a lot of time to your questions. Segun will spend about 30 minutes in conversation with our panelists, and we will open it up to Q&A. We will also send an email after the event with links to some of the resources shared here today. Segun, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jen. I'm very grateful to be here and to be in partnership with an organization like the Alliance for Business Leadership. Our offices are actually just a stone's throw away from each other, and so not only working in partnership on these events, but actually being in the same building together so that we can forge an even stronger and deeper partnership. And I just want to, call out or shout out ABL. The word leadership is in their name, and they absolutely show it on a number of issues impacting all of our communities, but particularly Black and Brown communities, things like transportation, things like increasing opportunities for businesses. And so we appreciate the work that you're doing every day. In this event that we're doing even today, sharing resources with so many who are looking to stabilize and grow their businesses or their organizations, given the difficulties we're facing with the pandemic. I am very happy today to be able to.
Oh, Segun, we got you on the mute by mistake.
Oh, well,
there we go.
I hope I wasn't muted the whole time, but I'm happy to reread the whole speech.
No, we just lost you the last 30 seconds.
All right. Well, again, I'm happy to be able to ask the questions and not answer them today. We have a very formidable panel, of experts in the field with us today, in the form of Quincy and Margaret and Natalia, all partners that we are grateful to work with to help our business members. And so I want to start off with a question for all the panelists here. Just share with us, and I'll start with Natalia here. Sharing with us what you've been doing since the pandemic really hit us back in March. How you've been supporting businesses of all kinds, and kind of the things that you're seeing, kind of the trends you're seeing between March and now 7 years later here in October.
What is time? Thank you so much, Segun. I'm so excited to be here. I want to thank ABL for bringing this incredible panel together. I think this is a really important conversation. So right around the time that we were finding out what COVID-19 was and what impact it would have on Massachusetts, due to obviously the governor's ordinance around essential businesses and the rest of the kind of closure of the economy, we wanted to know what was going on the ground. So immediately we started surveying businesses, and it has been a survey system that we kind of created from the very beginning for us to hear from businesses on the ground, what they're needing, what was going on, how we could support. So for us, that was a critical tool that we use, and we actually have used that data from our surveys every single step of the way. So businesses have been telling us what they need, and we have been reacting. One of the first things that we heard was, I can't take on more debt. So we worked really hard to come up with a relief program. And this is, right after several other cities did relief programs that basically crashed their systems right away. We, immediately said, okay, we're going to do a relief program, and we're going to do it equitably. We're going to do it in multiple languages, and we're not going to close the application process until we, have and are able to see accurate representation of businesses across the city. So I'm really proud to say that first relief fund had over 51% businesses of color. We had 47% immigrants reply to that fund, and we were able to execute on that direct grant. Immediately around the time when we started talking, and obviously I'm progressing here, so that was in April, around late June, mid-June, we started talking about what it would take to reopen our economy. And so we then started thinking about what are those barriers that businesses face every single day as it pertains to reopening. And so we said, okay, we're going to do a reopen fund. Again, direct service grants, debt-free grants that would allow businesses to get cash to do the thing that they needed to do to reopen equitably. Again, really targeting our neighborhoods. The Main Streets program falls under our wing, so we were able to work with them really closely on making sure that businesses knew about these relief grants. And we are still giving those out, and they've evolved a little bit over time. So they've, started for only the essential businesses, the businesses that were open. And then we said, okay, as different phases come in, we're going to, add more businesses to that. And the latest version of that is kind of, again, the progression, thinking about winter, and in particular for our restaurants, thinking about how they can stay open later. So we've offered an additional $1,000 grant for businesses to be able to take advantage advantage of kind of reopening without the barriers of finances. So that's like direct money. We also put together different lists of businesses. So we did the Black and Brown business list as a way to bring visibility and awareness of who our Black and Brown businesses are in Boston. We created a PPE list, thanks to you, Segun, and the incredible work at BECMA. You helped us build that, which was an incredible resource. We have put together guides and from the very beginning. So we had a restaurant guide for takeout and delivery. So how businesses could evolve with the times, how they could get online really quickly. And since about July, we've been doing webinars, workshops on all of the biggest issues that we're hearing from businesses, from, you know, how to negotiate with their landlords and leases. How do I bring my marketing online? How do I build a social media presence? Knowing that the digital divide is so deeply ingrained, you know, we've been trying to just be as available for businesses as possible. We also set up the first ever virtual office hours that have happened in the city, I think. And these virtual office hours have been happening every Friday from 11 to 2 and from 9 to 11 and 2 to 4 every single Friday since April. And what that has done is helped us build relationships with businesses and really establish that trust that we are here to support them, but also given them access to the resources that they may not know are there. There's a lot more stuff that I can talk about, but I think those are the key tools that we've put out that I think have been really instrumental to small businesses. I think you also asked about trends, and I think, you know, each kind of season has brought a different issue, as we all know. The City of Boston and the licensing board, as well as the PIC, we worked really closely with, I think it was like 8 different departments inside City Hall to establish outdoor dining and make it really easy for people to be able to access public space for that matter. We also did that for retail, and we also did it for parks and creating an opportunity for fitness businesses. And so each season has brought different issues. Right now we're trying to figure out how we help businesses through kind of the rent moratorium ending at the end of the week. And, you know, winter is something that has always been a problem for businesses. I think when you look at retail, when you look at business restaurants, you look at winter being always a slow season, and obviously the pandemic has made it even slower, even crazier. So our response is really, how do we help businesses survive and then thrive as well? And for us, it's really about meeting people where they are, and by hearing from businesses, we've been able to be responsive, and obviously always looking for ideas. So I do hope the folks that are listening today would be willing to engage with us and help us create creative solutions for continuing through the pandemic.
And on day 7, you rested. That's lots of stuff.
I don't think we're resting yet. Soon,
but you know, have to give credit. You know, if you could mention the amount of those grants, the total amount, and then also, if your office plans on making those grants available again, and where folks can find that information, just so that we're sharing that resource with folks who are here now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll put some links in the chat with when Margaret or Quincy are speaking. So the first grant was about $7 million that was allotted to this pot of money. And the second grant has been $6 million allotted to this. So we're still giving out grants. To date, we've given out almost, it's like $7.5, almost $8 million. Again, direct grants to businesses. The Reopen Fund is still available. So if someone is still struggling with opening costs, like, please reach out to us. Obviously, we are the City of Boston, so our funds are tied to businesses that are physically in the City of Boston. But if you can prove that you do business here in the city, we will help you cover those costs. Everything that I've talked about can be found at boston.gov/small-business. And anyone who has any question at all, any question at all, please email us at smallbiz@boston.gov. Again, I'll put everything in the chat, and I'll also make sure that the folks at ABL have this information to share out.
Thank you so much, Natalia. I want to move to Margaret on this one. just to keep it in the public sector before we get to Quincy and Eastern and what the banking industry is doing. But from your vantage point, Margaret, if you could share with us what the state has been doing to support small businesses. Of course, from our lens, we would love to hear about any focus on Black and Brown communities. But also, Natalia focused on Boston, and we know that there are folks that may not operate in Boston who are on this call. So if you're seeing what other cities and towns across the Commonwealth are doing to support businesses.
Sure, thank you so much, Segun. I feel like Natalia and I share the same fire hose, right? We have been working together. I'm a panelist on her weekly City of Boston Small Business Resource calls, and been doing that through so many other communities. And I think that's one of the roles I've been doing for the administration, is that communication, connecting with whether it's the local city and town or the Chamber of Commerce. The area I represent is Greater Boston. The Southeast, I've been serving on the Cape Cod Reopening Task Force, and making sure that we're sharing what is being done throughout the Commonwealth. So the Office of Business Development is under Secretary Mike Keneally in Housing and Economic Development. He and the Lieutenant Governor are co-chairing the Reopening Advisory Board. So normally my role is supporting businesses, helping them grow jobs in the economy, and connecting them to any of the programs, grants, and incentives offered directly through the Commonwealth or any of our quasi-partners. And with COVID, it's really been a pivot of interpreting what's happening with the Reopening Advisory Board and helping guide businesses through this process. So I'm happy to share my contact information, and if there's anything I can do offline with any of your members, I welcome them to contact me directly. So big transition. I don't want to take too much time here, but where we started back in March and the methodical approach and the strategies and reopening in the various phases have come with sector-specific protocols and really a lot of understanding for businesses. When we started, I felt like we did a lot of conversations around PPP and the SBA programs. And our Mass Growth Capital, in response to that, you talked about resources for the Black and Brown communities. One of the frustrations we heard, particularly with the first round of PPP, was accessibility in the small percentage of Black and Brown-owned businesses that access that fund. Mass Growth Capital is one of our quasi-partner agencies and took the lead in interpreting all of the documentation, the applications to multi-languages. That wasn't available. They did offer it in Spanish up front, but we felt that was really essential. And we saw in the second round in Massachusetts did really well with the PPP program, but we did see an increase in that after that assistance was provided. And then also that agency has been the leader on Small Be Strong, so it's smallbestrong.com. And this is a technical assistance that was set up for women and minority-owned businesses. And we welcome you to connect with them, anything from accounting and tax help, digitization, human resources, legal, marketing, general operations. We recognize that, I think when people think technical assistance, we're not going to help you, well, we will help you with your computer, but it's what is it that we can assist with your business to help you navigate? And those resources are there. We have a lot of other partner organizations we've been looking at, and just really saying to the business, make that phone call. We are here to help. And my conversation with everybody is different, right? Depending on what your business needs are. We have loads of resources that available. For example, one that I often talk about is the Workforce Training Fund. When you're paying into unemployment, you pay a fee into this, and companies can draw down up to $250,000 in training dollars. It does require an in-kind match of paying, you'd be paying your salary and benefits, but something the Commonwealth has launched is we've really recognized that ESOL training is critical for businesses, and the in-kind match on that particular training programs has been recently waived. We have some great resources. The Economic Development Bill, the administration announced back in March and was one of the last events I went to pre-COVID. And that's something that the Baker-Polito administration has pivoted to recognize that COVID has had significant impact on the minority community and has put in additional resources. That is still in the process. We are in committee and waiting on that to be voted in, and I'm happy when that comes through. There's grants, there's technical assistance, there's micro enterprise funding. There's a lot of resources in there that are focused on the minority communities. And once those resources are voted, I'm happy to then make those connections. And, you know, Segun, your organization, BECMA, the Mass Black Expo that's up and coming, are often in part of when we're talking to businesses about who to get connected to. We recognize the great work that you do and are often referring to you as an industry partner as well. So I'm happy to get into too much detail. I don't want to take up too much time here, but thank you.
No. I appreciate, you know, you're sharing all those resources, and we're going to come back to some of the things that you brought up regarding mass growth and the bond bill, which is an important point that I do want to raise later on. You know, I want to move to Quincy just to, you know, for this opening question to share what Eastern's been doing to support small businesses, nonprofits across the Commonwealth.
Yeah, thanks, Segun. And maybe I'll actually even talk sort of more holistic in terms of financial institutions in general. You know, we don't have to spend much time now. So I know we'll come back to it, but obviously PPP was a big part of the commitment from financial institutions that continues today. Obviously the program's not still putting out new money, but it is in terms of getting ready for forgiveness, which again, I'm sure we'll have a chance to come to. Again, I'd say a lot of financial institutions had a number of things. Some of them are still going, many of them are still going on today. For example, loan deferrals for both individuals and small businesses. So you think about it as a small business owner, you know, if you have a loan with a financial institution or on your own personal side with, you know, a mortgage, et cetera, loan deferrals has been something that all financial institutions have really stepped up to allow people time to get through this difficult challenge and this pandemic that we're working through. So many institutions have done deferrals from, you know, what may have been 3 months or 6 months. The regulators have actually made it easier for banks to be able to provide these for our customers so that it's not sort of counted negatively against the bank of having a loan in default. And so that goes on officially through, as it sits today, through the end of December, that banks can continue to support their customers with that. So that's something that I would recommend, that if particularly small businesses who are becoming more concerned, if you haven't taken advantage of something like that, we're coming closer to maybe the slower months with it being winter for you. That's something to definitely make sure you reach out to your financial institution and talk about. Obviously at Eastern, we've been very supportive of that. Banks have had programs in supporting different fee relief due to hardship that I would tell people to continue to make sure that they look for while they're working with their financial institutions. And then, you know, for example, the different foundations that are out there. I know the Eastern Bank Charitable Foundation, you know, this year alone, we have committed and put out there in our community over $8 million in grants to organizations who are supporting efforts around the support of COVID, whether that be, you know, nonprofits who are supporting businesses, particularly businesses of color, with their own funds, grant funds, et cetera. So we've been funding those. From other economic empowerment in general. Health obviously has been a big investment for us, food and food insecurity. And we have more coming on top of that. I think in a time where some foundations, because of, you know, the impacts are doing less, the Eastern Bank Charitable Foundation really felt this was a moment where we needed to do more. But, you know, in terms of trends, what I would say, particularly as we think about small businesses, there was a lot of stimulus, as everybody knows, that came out, whether it's both individual and businesses. That has been held up. Sort of a next round of stimulus has been held up in Congress and continues to be. You know, we're not sure when that's going to come through. If it looks more and more like every day that that's going to be after the election, which is concerning. But I do feel that that is something critically important that particularly our small businesses need. And, it couldn't be more clear if you look at the words that the Fed Chairman Jay Powell shared at his comments. I guess it was maybe a week ago or so. He was very specific that too little support would lead to a weak economy. Essentially, in basic words, saying if there's not more stimulus that's provided to businesses and individuals, we are going to see a deterioration from where we are today in our economy. And obviously that is code for more business failures without additional support, because obviously COVID has lasted much longer than, all of these programs were set up to sort of get us through 3 to 6 months. So that's really clear. And the other thing I'd point out that he said, which is spot on, is that slow recovery will have a disproportionate impact on the inequities that already exist with small businesses of color and people of Black and brown people in America. And so, that's, I think, the piece as we think about the trends as we move forward. It's still very concerning, and we're hopeful that we'll see additional stimulus here soon.
Thank you very much. Well, everything that we've talked about so far are, ways that all of you have helped to support small businesses up until this point, and all really important resources that have helped to keep a lot of our businesses alive. A statement that you just made, Quincy, about, potential business failures coming up very shortly. I know for the Black business community, we are, I never mean to sound alarmist, but it's the reality, but many of our businesses are just facing absolute extinction. Because a lot of them have not had access to the resources. You bring up PPP. Many of our businesses in the first round, as we all know, didn't get access. Margaret, you brought up that in the second round, we did a little better. But part of that was due to the fact that nonprofit organizations like BECMA, Amplify, others, partnered up with lending institutions like Eastern and Berkshire and others, and technical assistance providers to funnel, to create a pipeline for Black and brown businesses to get PPP. But that's not the end all be all, right? PPP is over. So I'm wondering, my questions now will kind of think about how your organizations and institutions can support particularly Black and brown businesses today and tomorrow. So Quincy, for you, obviously our folks can't take on more debt, but for those who are seeking out, lending in some form or fashion, I'm wondering if the moment that we're in right now, yes, COVID, but also now we're having a racial justice conversation after witnessing the lynching of George Floyd and so many other negative and deadly interactions with police officers. So I'm wondering if this moment is providing an opportunity for not just Eastern, but any financial institution to think about just their lending practices with Black and other minority communities. Considering what their terms of loans are, things like that. We saw a little bit of this happening at Berkshire with Malia Lazu. Wondering if things like that, or do you see from your vantage point banks reconsidering, how they're doing business with Black and brown businesses?
Yeah, what I would say is that, and this isn't just financial institutions, right? We see a positive sliver of commitment from corporations in general to addressing inequities within our society, right? And obviously banks have been there making those same commitments. And so that's encouraging. I want to see real action from my peers in the financial institution. I had the opportunity to speak at a national conference for the Consumer Bankers Association, and that's one of the calls to action that I made to the industry, is to make greater commitment to equity, not only in lending practices, but in hiring. Predominantly education as well. So the short answer to the question is yes, I've seen commitments. You just heard Chase, for example, make a very large commitment to this focus. I think it was $3 billion. They're obviously the nation's largest bank. And so if we can have financial institutions, both big and small, like Eastern, making the commitment and demonstrating that this isn't only the right thing to do in support of our communities and our economy in general, but it's the smart thing to do in helping all of our communities grow, then I I feel better today than I have across my career about that commitment. But I want to see the action come forward, is what I would say, Segun.
Yeah,
I think, again, when I would just, again, debt is a part of it, and I understand. I mean, banks are we are on the debt end of things, right? So that's the sort of role that we play. And so, the good news is, on the debt side is that, rates, given where we are in the economy right now, are at really sort of all-time lows. I'd say there are still the PPP program's over, but the EIDL, the Emergency Disaster Loan, through the SBA, and that's another forgivable, so it's a little bit more complex than the PPP loan. But that emergency disaster relief loan is still out there and available through the SBA. If a lot of people think that those two are the same programs, they're not. They're two separate programs. And then, just another aspect of what I think banks are doing now. I mean, we did, there's been, I don't know the total number of thousands of PPP loans done across the Commonwealth. Eastern did over 8,000 for over $1 billion ourselves. What's happening right now in real-time information, so I'm sure there's a number of people on the line questioning this, is we're just at the beginning stages of the forgiveness process of these PPP loans. So just to be clear, it's a grant if you get full forgiveness. If you don't get forgiveness, it's a loan. So this is really important now for those businesses who have gotten their PPP loans to maximize their forgiveness, which they should be able to do. But as with many things in the PPP process, it's not simple and clean. There's actually 3 different application processes you can go through. The good news is the SBA just approved a simplified application for loans under $50,000 or less. That was just announced last week. So that is that's the lion's share of units that were produced in the industry. I'm north of 50% of all the loans across the industry, and it's somewhere between 50 and 70%, I'm sure, based on the institution, are loans under $50,000. So that's a lot of the volume. That is a very simplified process that's now available. The businesses still are going to have to provide their documentation. And the SBA has the right to go back and review that documentation at any time, but the banks aren't going to be required to validate every piece of information, just that we've received the documentation. So it's going to be one page, and that's going to make it very streamlined for the majority of people who have applied. So I think for most of our small businesses, that's actually great news. If your loan's over $50,000, there's actually a second application called the EZ application. There's a couple stipulations in there, but the real stipulations are, did you retain your employees? Did you retain their salaries? But if you answer yes to a couple questions, you can use the EZ application, which is 3 pages long. So if you're over 50 and you don't qualify for the new one they just released, you also have that EZ option. And then finally, if you don't qualify for either one of those, let's say you had a $52,000 loan and you reduced your salary, so you didn't qualify for the EZ. You have to do the standard application, which is much longer and doesn't require more documentation. But banks are here, and everybody. This just came out last week, so everyone's now getting their systems up and running to be able to begin to accept these PPP forgiveness requests. But the most important aspect is to take advantage of the longer window that they've had to be able to spend the money so that the businesses can make sure this loan actually becomes a grant and they get full forgiveness.
Important points raised, particularly, so for Chase, I know that what they announced was 30 billion.
30 billion, thank you.
Which is, well, but I say that to say, to your point about seeing action, we have an ask out to the folks that we, are in conversation with at Chase to get a better understanding of how that will be deployed and ensure that that money actually reaches the intended communities that they say they want to impact. And that's why we asked this question about, part of it is they want to increase their loans to small businesses in Black and brown communities. But if it's structured, if the loans and other things are structured the way they are now, you know, that kind of cuts us out, because that's the reason why many of us don't go for, you know, for those products. But again,
one thing that I'd say, Segun, too, and this is not to give an excuse to the banks, but there's certain things that banks have to follow from a regulatory perspective too. So when we talk about really breaking down some of the systemic barriers that exist, this was, you know, I heard the head of the OCC at this conference was talking about this, and I'll use the consumer side as an example, because it's the consumer side is very relevant to everybody. And it's sort of basic underwriting. But if you look at a credit score is the basis for getting any credit in the United States. Yet Black and brown people are 2 times more likely to not have a credit score than someone who is white. So forget the underwriting policy beyond the credit. The point is, if you don't have a credit score, you can't even apply. And so there's also some regulatory barriers that are in place that, as you know, and this is that we need to work with our, you know, government regulators to change, so that it actually allows the banks to be able to do more as well. So it's really both sides of the equation that we have to work, particularly because fair lending is sort of so clear and cut. You know, fair lending in many ways cuts both ways, that you can't do something, you know, fair lending was designed so that you wouldn't treat people differently, but that means you can't create a different program to treat someone who is, you know, who has not had the right opportunity or had the right access. You can't create a program for them, this is on the consumer side, that's not available for everybody else. And that's a regulation that we have to live through. So it really is this yin and yang that we need to work through from both the financial institutions who haven't been making this commitment, and the regulatory agencies who regulate how we are able to serve the communities that we work in.
yes, and I know that Congresswoman Presley has been working on that issue too. So we'll look forward to working with you and Jen and others to help get her legislation across the finish line to address that exact issue related to credit scores. Margaret, I want to ask you about, you know, sticking with this idea of what is happening now and in the future for the state. So I know that, you know, you brought up mass growth earlier. And one of the ways that the Baker administration responded to COVID way in the beginning in March was making $10 million available in the form of low interest loans through Mass Growth Capital Corporation. But we know that that 10 million was gone in 36 hours. And so, and actually what they received, you know, hundreds and hundreds of applications that demonstrated a need for $137 million in support. But that was when this first started, that money was gone. And we know as an organization that that money did not reach Black and brown businesses, because in order to apply for the loan, you had to know about it, and the information was sent to who was already in the ecosystem. So I guess my question is, you know, are you aware at all of any commitment from the Baker administration to provide additional support to either directly to businesses through Mass Growth or other departments, or providing support to other cities and towns who have not been able to match the efforts of Boston to help their small businesses?
Sure. Let's start with, we talked briefly about the Partnerships for Growth Economic Development bill that the Baker-Polito administration has put forth and is pending legislative approval at this time. Mass Growth Capital has some great resources in that. A lot of it is focused on lender equity. First is the BIZ Power Grant program, and this originally had 5 million. They increased it to have 15 million, and it's focused on one-to-one crowdsourcing matching for micro business, and focus targeted on, you know, low-income women, veteran, minority-owned businesses. And another program is $35 million for community development financial institutions, and they are looking at expanding economic opportunity in low-income communities and providing access to financial products, and for the underserved populations, lowering the barrier of that access to capital. So both of those programs are in this pending economic development bill.
Sounds good. Yeah, and I know that as you said, that bill is in conference committee, and you know, I don't know if any legislators are watching or will be, but you know, we have certainly advocated for that bill to come out of conference. You know, to your point about some of the increase in money, BECMA worked with Rep. Miranda to increase the grant monies to $10 million specifically for minority businesses, which is all of this is necessary because our businesses, like I said, are facing extinction. But we'll look forward to hearing, whether or not the Baker administration, outside of the policy aspect and the legislative aspect, will be able to provide more financial assistance. I know we're all facing a budget issue, but from our perspective, we can't afford more of our businesses to fail.
I guess all on that would be the eviction diversion initiative, and I'm not fully versed in that, but that was just announced this week and was talking about, recognizing the needs that are out there now with the moratorium's ending, there's still a federal moratorium in place, and how we are giving financial support, direct financial support for things like rental assistance, things like legal resources and help. So there's most definitely, again, that fire hose and
Absolutely.
Of opportunities, and happy to talk offline to anyone to connect them.
Sounds good. And Natalia, I'm wondering, so you mentioned that some of these grants are still open on the city side. Wondering, first of all, how that money became available, and if you see the mayor or have heard any commitment from the mayor of putting money in the regular operating budget, for next year, to make resources available to small businesses in the Boston area.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So when we first were talking about the grant money in April with the Small Business Relief Fund, at that time we didn't yet have all the clarity around any federal relief that was coming in and what it could be spent on, what it couldn't be spent on. So we actually pulled internal resources for that. The Attorney General's office was also really generous there and contributed a chunk of money towards that grant. So it was really about a collaborative effort at that point. Since then, and as we've learned more about the CARES Act funding and additional funding that the city has received from the state and the federal government, the Small Business Reopen Fund was all of that came from the CARES Act funding. I think we in my office we received federal grants through the CDBG funding program, as well as neighborhood development grants, and both of those contribute to our existing programming, which we have fully ramped up and are executing on now. So we have a TA program, as well as the Restore and Design Facade Improvement Program, and then in addition to that, all of the Main Streets programs actually fall under that umbrella. So there is already a ton of funds and a ton of resources allocated towards small businesses. We also have the neighborhood access loans, which are very, very favorable loans that can be accessed to small businesses, and that's another resource. I think, as we continue to move forward, we have to continue to advocate for additional funding coming from the federal government. The city, we all know that the city's budget is really limited. And so I'm not going to speak on whether or not the mayor has been able to come up with additional funding come next year, but it is something that we're thinking about every single day. And it's something that I'm hoping that we are able to, continue to be creative about how we allocate resources. And again, a lot of businesses are reaching out to us, asking us to, for grants so that they can provide marketing, for example, for their business. And then we don't have those direct funds at this time, but what we do have is marketing professionals that we can pair a business up with. So a lot of the resources that folks are needing right now, we can actually support businesses under our existing TA program. Obviously, there's a lot of other, financial needs right now, like covering rents and mortgages and paying employees, which doesn't necessarily get covered by that. But I think that there are a lot of soft costs that the city can really cover through existing resources that we have.
Good stuff. And I wonder, I don't know how possible this is, but wonder how we can get, we have city represented, the capital city represented, we got the state represented, and we got financial institutions represented. I'm wondering what kind of collaboration can happen between these three different sectors too. So like, for instance, the mayor has done a great job of raising capital for for the COVID relief fund, right, to help nonprofits, but wondering, what the governor and the mayor can do to work together to create an additional fund from all of these major companies and corporations who are housed here in Massachusetts, that we help to increase their coffers every year, and so wonder how they can work together to with folks like Quincy and others to create an additional source for our businesses, to help people outside of Boston too, because Boston, again, have to give credit. This doesn't happen often, so I got to do this. But to have to give credit to the city for helping out a lot of folks. But the problem is that if you're not in Boston and you're a Black or brown business, you've had no support because you couldn't get PPP, and your city or town either doesn't have the resources or just wasn't able to put something together. So anyway, I just wonder if it's a possibility. We don't have to make this happen right now, although that'd be great.
Yeah, so Segun, I do want to just showcase a couple of examples of how this has already happened. And I know that the mayor and the governor are very close. They, chat all the time. Quincy has a direct line to the mayor as well. And, most large, organizations have really great relationships, and they're building towards that. So I know Eastern Bank was one of the banks that very early on said that they would work with homeowners, business owners to work with them on their mortgages. So, there have been rental compacts and things like that where it really takes that leveraging of private and public relationships to be able to move forward. I know a lot on the food access stuff with the Boston Resiliency Fund that you mentioned. There's been a ton of, public and private collaboration around, getting folks the resources that they need. We've, tried to figure out how we could support businesses, all businesses, and, all of our programs, all of our services are free. So all of the workshops and webinars, we encourage, even if you're not a Boston resident, you can still participate and get some of those benefits. I think, as it pertains to, financing things and setting up funds, I think those are a little bit more complicated and require a lot more collaboration. But I think the mayor is open to creative solutions. He always has been. He's been a champion of, the underdog. He's the one that has, been really actively pushing for both private institutions as well as the governor to move on a lot of the stuff that would be truly, helpful to businesses from, I know we pushed a lot around the liquor, extensions and making sure that restaurants could really operate in a pandemic. So I think there's a niche spaces for that. And I can comfortably say that the mayor would welcome any additional ideas around how we could better partner with all of our institutions.
Wonderful. Well, we'll make sure to get that to happen. Well, my final question, we've talked about the resources that you all are providing for small businesses, nonprofits, et cetera. So I'm wondering, for those who are watching either here on Zoom or via Facebook, what small businesses and nonprofits should be doing to prepare to use or utilize those resources? What do they need to have available on their end so that when they visit your website or reach out to you via email or phone, that they're prepared to take advantage of the resources that you're making available to them? And that's for anybody. Why don't we start with you, Margaret, go to Quincy, and end with Natalia.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to have a conversation. Like I said, the resources applicable vary by industry. So happy just to give me a call or email, and I'll ask, want to hear from you. I think there's quite a few resources I definitely didn't get into that go statewide, CDBG, whether, how other communities have utilized that funding. I think the Shared Streets program that really reached throughout to help people pivot, the Mass Emergency Response Team and what we're able to do. I know you were part of that, Segun, with the PPE initiatives and how we were able to help a lot of businesses there. We do have a database on the Supplier Diversity Office in the Commonwealth, and that is searchable, whether it's an LGBT business, a minority business, a veterans business. And the Commonwealth has a great program our supplier diversity program. And I think this is something to connect with. So we're talking about, as we're struggling, but let's also talk about how we can create and generate revenue for these businesses and how the Commonwealth can support that. And I think that's really important, and it's easy to access, and I can help facilitate the steps to do that. But just so that, for a quick overview, it's that our Commonwealth certifies minority, women, and veteran-owned firms, and any vendor who does business at $150,000 or more contract has a requirement to spend some of their contract dollars with these businesses as well. So getting them connected, getting them into our system, and trying to find, in helping them learn where to access, how to connect their goods and services to this funding source is something I'm happy to work with any of your members on. And then I should also make note, you talked about the potential funding, and we have partnered with the City of Boston. It's the Mass COVID-19 Relief Fund. This was stood up very early on in the process, raised over $30 million, connected over 560 nonprofits statewide. It was chaired by First Lady Lauren Baker. It did address a lot of the food insecurity issues, but we do have that, and it was recognized that the immigrant populations, homeless populations, stable populations really needed that support in getting that directly connected, and not doing it as a new entity, but connecting with the existing nonprofits that are doing this work in our communities throughout all 351 municipalities in the Commonwealth. It was really, funds were released regionally through existing partnerships. So we are grateful to everybody that has been engaged with us. We have great partners throughout the state, and we're able to utilize them. It's MASS-MA COVID-19 Relief Fund.org. And actually that was a program in partnership, I believe, with Eastern Bank, right, Quincy?
It was happy to support that as well. So maybe Segun, I'll go just quick because I know we want to get to some other questions. From the bank side, obviously the most important piece is to make sure you have, particularly for PPP, your documentation prepared and have that ready. That's going to be critical for forgiveness. But again, everything else is really about, ensuring that you have your financials in the right place as you come in and ask if you're looking for forbearance or deferred loan opportunities. It's just understanding, the reasons for that. So I wouldn't say there's a lot. It's just really taking the proactive approach to reach out.
Great. So I know one of the questions was about data on how many businesses have closed. I know on our end for BECMA, we partnered with a number of organizations, Mass Association of CDCs and LISC Boston, Amplify, et cetera, and worked with Mass Inc. over the summer to produce a survey of businesses across the Commonwealth. I believe we talked to about 1,000 businesses, and just the top line data from that in terms of how bad it is, how many businesses have closed. When we look at Black businesses, that's 11% of Black businesses are currently closed. This is as of July, so this is October, so we know that things have gotten worse. But 11% at that time, 8% of Latinx-owned businesses, 13% of white-owned businesses. Important for these statistics, though, to note that that the impact. So for 11%, it might sound smaller than that 13% for white businesses, but there are only 2,000 Black firms here in Massachusetts. So that 11% has a much larger impact in our community compared to one with 187,000 firms here in the Commonwealth. But at the end of the day, the pandemic is having this ripple effect and having a detrimental, huge, devastating impact on our communities. I'll be happy to share that information with everyone here. I'm not sure if anyone else here I know Natalia, the city, has their own. You mentioned weekly surveys, I think. I think you're still doing that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we are starting to collect that data a little bit more intentionally. It's been really hard for us to collect because traditionally there isn't like a place where a business, when they close, where they go to. I know for the state there is a requirement for anyone who employs more than 50 employees, they must report that. But obviously our small businesses are less than 5 employees. And so as we think about how we're capturing that, we did create a very simple questionnaire that that we're asking folks to let us know which businesses are closed. There have been a couple of journalists collecting restaurant closures, as well as some additional, all of our main streets and other business associations are capturing some of that locally. But there's a whole realm of folks, who have businesses from home, who may be, who we're just not capturing. So I will also put that form in the chat, because if folks can help us spread the word. We're trying to just capture that information, because traditionally it just hasn't been something that we capture.
Thank you much. And there's just a couple of the questions here that I know we can get done very quickly. I'm getting looks from Claire, who's done a wonderful job putting this event together on behalf of ABL. Patricia, who is a BECMA member, great to see you this morning. We'll make sure that you get all the contact information from all of the panelists here, including Margaret. And to the other attendee asking about community organizations or websites where we can get updates on all of these programs in one place. Awesome question. I know many are working to coordinate to get all of these resources in one place so that it's easy for business owners and nonprofits. I know that I don't think Jen would disagree with me that we can definitely make our websites a hub of resources, not only of what was shared here today, but statewide what exists for business owners and nonprofits to make sure that's available on our side. I don't know, Margaret or Natalia, if you have, if your websites kind of serve as that hub as well. Quincy, if Eastern serves that role at all.
With us, we do have the Mass BizWorks guide that pulls a lot of that together. And I just think there's so many, because we partner with so many other agencies and quasi and nonprofit partners. And as things are funded, there's a lot of change. So a conversation with me is one way to really help me understand what you have happening, and I'll interpret the menu for you to save you from opening 100 windows on your screen.
And I also encourage anyone who wants to, we do a weekly newsletter of resources that the city's offering, and welcome anyone to join it. Just send us an email at smallbiz@boston.gov, and we will add you to that listserv. Lots of interesting stuff on there.
Thank you so much. Well, I want to thank you all for the wonderful work that you're doing to help save and support our businesses. Margaret, Quincy, Natalia, please all of you reach out for more information to them. And again, want to thank the Alliance for Business Leadership for having us as partners, not only on this event, but in life and the work that we're doing together. So I'll turn this back over to Jen for some closing words, but thank you all for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone. I want to thank Quincy, Natalia, and Margaret for not only your time and expertise today, but for all the ways that you've made yourselves available to business and the community leaders during the crisis. We are grateful to Segun for his leadership and to our partners at BECMA for convening this conversation with us today. I also want to mention that BECMA just announced it will hold the Mass Black Expo in a virtual format next month from November 13th through 15th. The first expo was hosted last November and featured over 60 Black-owned businesses and organizations and connected close to 1,000 people to more than 25 business development workshops and resources. We look forward to continuing ABL's virtual programming. So be sure to visit alliancebl.org to watch a recording of past programs, join our email list, or to learn more about becoming a member. Thank you all for joining us today, and take care.